Recently, I was playing Mario Kart World and got to replay its rendition of Mario Kart Wii's Toad Factory. Okay, I'm kidding, I just thought it'd be funny to skip Bowser again. We've already gone through several different characters' tracks in the Mario Kart series. Mario, Luigi, Yoshi, Donkey Kong, and even the Boos. I'd say each of these characters have a generally consistent feel between their tracks. Mario usually has more generic tracks due to being the main character of the franchise. Luigi also gets a bit of that as well due to being his brother, plus a little bit of Luigi's Mansion flair every now and then. Yoshi's tracks generally have a wilderness feel, and when they don't, the track is literally in the shape of a Yoshi. What are you gonna call that, Diddy Kong circuit? DK has a focus on jungles and mountains, with the exception of DK Spaceport, but that entire thing is also just based on Donkey Kong. And finally, the Boo tracks are, shockingly, haunted. For Toad though, they really just slap his name onto anything. There's not really a consistent connection between his 4 unique tracks in the series. For that reason, I think he's got some of the most variety out of all characters with named tracks. And that variety extends outside of just the track themes too. He's also got a wide range of quality. Welcome to another episode of Level by Level. As always, we're going to analyze all 4 Toad tracks, plus their remakes to determine which one is the best and which is the worst. That brings us to a total of 7 tracks that we need to analyze today and slap onto our tier list. This is going to be our shortest character episode yet, which is partially why I chose it. I want to play more Tomodachi Life, I'm sorry. I still think this will be a fun episode though, especially with how many different settings and themes we'll be dealing with. As always, the tier list in this video is just meant for the Toad tracks and doesn't take the entire series into account. So an F tier track here wouldn't necessarily be an F tier track with every Mario Kart course considered. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right in. As always, we'll be going in chronological order here, so after killing Super Mario Kart, we could look at the series' very first Toad track with Toad's Turnpike. Immediately, I think you could see what I mean by them just slapping Toad's name onto anything they could. Sure, there's a couple signs with Toad on them here, but they could replace that with anyone. The idea behind this track is meant to capture the feeling of driving down the road at dusk. Compared to any other track in the Mario Kart series up until this point, none of the others take place at a similar time of day or location. It gives this rendition of Toad's Turnpike a pretty distinct vibe, especially with that gorgeous skybox that's visible throughout the entire track. But of course, as a road-based course, Toad's Turnpike also includes several cars as obstacles. Nowadays, there are a ton of tracks that use cars as a gimmick, to the point of them being almost oversaturated. Toad's Turnpike though was the first. It's seen everything. Many people would even argue that the cars were at their very best here on the N64, and to be honest, I think they kinda have a point. Unlike every other Mario Kart game, the cars here are absolutely ginormous. That obviously makes them quite difficult to avoid, which you'll want to do of course, as otherwise you might... That's also helped by the track's actual layout. Now looking at the map, it is incredibly simple. This is in the shape of a figure 8. Luckily, this is a lot better than Figure 8 circuit since the cars here actually act as good obstacles. Swerving around them while also trying to avoid all the other racers here is pretty fun. The layout is still a bit simpler than I maybe would have liked, but as the first car track in the series, I think this certainly works. For most of the course, the traffic is divided into 3 lanes, which gives you a decent amount of space to move between the cars. I also really like how they integrated the item boxes here, as they're placed off at the side of the road in very specific pockets. Depending on the car's movements, they can sometimes be tricky to reach, but I think that definitely adds to the fun. The last main element of note about the layout comes near the end, as the 3-lane road actually becomes a 2-lane road. That makes it so the cars are much tighter together, and the racers have a lot less room to move around the vehicles. That in turn makes the ending of the race much more intense, which I always appreciate seeing in these tracks. Now all of that alone would be enough for this to be considered a solid course, but this version of Toad's Turnpike also has one of the coolest Easter eggs in the entire Mario Kart series. Mario Kart 64 was the very first game in the series to have mirror mode, which when enabled will mirror the track. On Toad's Turnpike though, not only are the turns flipped, but the cars actually drive totally different. Instead of driving in the same direction as the racers, they'll now drive towards the racers. That makes them significantly harder to avoid, making the mirror mode version of Toad's Turnpike one of the series' hardest tracks. What makes this more memorable is the fact that none of the other car tracks in the series have done this, which is a shame, but at least that gives Toad's Turnpike here a reason to stand out. So for being such a solid introduction to the car concept, I'm gonna throw this up in B tier. It is being held back by the fact that it doesn't really have a complex layout or any shortcuts. No, clipping out of bounds doesn't count. But this is still a fun one to come back to. As always, I like to end these segments briefly touching on the music, and wow is this a great song. Perfectly fits with the chill vibes of driving down a road at night. Our next game in the series was Mario Kart Super Circuit.
There's nothing.
Our next game in the series was Mario Kart Double Dash.
There's nothing.
Mario Kart DF.
There's nothing.
Okay, Toad went quite a while without a new track. Luckily, Mario Kart Wii did pick up the slack by introducing the fan favorite Toad's Factory. Of the 4 tracks we have to talk about today, it's clear that this has easily the most interesting theme of the bunch. Not only is the idea of racing in a factory fun by itself, but this is specifically the factory that is said to make all of the game's item boxes. And with that, the Mario Kart lore is already more clear than FNAF. Throughout the track, you'll see plenty of details that hint towards the item boxes being created, like several of the obstacles and some of the conveyors throughout the course. I also just love the general color scheme of this place. Instead of having an average grimy sort of look, the factory has a lot of bright yellows throughout it. I think that mixes extra well with the dirt-filled exterior, giving this place a really fun construction vibe. But how does the layout itself play into the track's theme? Well, on the surface, it looks even more simple than Toad's Turnpike did, just being a square with a wobbly corner. That makes sense as this is a Mushroom Cup course, but the developers did at least make each area of the track have distinct obstacles to keep the gameplay exciting. Entering into the factory brings us face to face with 3 conveyors and some crushers on the ceiling. Both of these fit quite well into the setting, with the conveyors moving the product and the crushers smashing open some crates with item boxes inside. Gameplay wise, this immediately presents the player with a pretty interesting decision. They could either avoid the conveyors entirely as the safest path, go down the middle conveyor for a speed boost but risk getting crushed, or they could take the backwards conveyors, which slows them down but also allows them to get extra items. I think this area is a great example of how to add interesting options for a Mario Kart track. Each path has its own reason to go down, and that makes replaying this section significantly more fun as you change your strategy each race. Putting this at the beginning was also a pretty good choice, as the chaos of all the racers bunched together really adds to the danger the crushers put onto the player. After a quick turn, the player is led outside, which acts as a nice break in the aesthetic and opens up the area for new obstacles. The floor below the player now moves around, along with there being even more conveyors. Keeping the item boxes on conveyors not only fits with the theme, but in my opinion makes them more fun to grab as you weave into the correct position. Or you could hit a crate. Re-entering the factory puts us onto the wobbly turn I mentioned earlier, most of which being covered by a very large conveyor belt. This time you have to try and go down the correct side or else you'll lose a ton of speed. It can be harder to stick to than it seems, especially since the roads will shift around as the race goes on. It's very important to pay close attention to this section, especially with how close to the end it is. Speaking of, after driving through this tunnel with a million alerts, you have to take one big leap out of the factory. The gameplay is nothing too special, but I love how this jump feels like the player is finally breaking free from a shift in the factory. The race isn't fully over just yet though, as the mud pit at the end can easily trip people up that aren't prepared for it. As expected, mud will significantly slow down anyone that goes on top of it, so the player has to try and hit boost panels to get across. The problem is that the boosts are hidden under the fronts of bulldozers that move back and forth, meaning the player has to quickly react to which side is open. This is a great way to add just a little bit more intensity to the end of the race, which I mentioned liking quite a bit back in Toad's Turnpike. And of course, bulldozer obstacles fit perfectly into the construction factory vibe this course was going for. So I think it's safe to say that this track is pretty fantastic. It's a fan favorite for a reason. Every section utilizes the factory theming perfectly to provide unique obstacles that only really fit on this track. This is easily a contender for one of the best Mushroom Cup tracks in the series, so I honestly have no issues putting this up in A tier. Okay, I know that it may be blasphemous to not put this in S tier, but all will be explained later. It's not what you think. Anyway, this is all without even mentioning the song, which is one of the series' most iconic pieces of music right next to stuff like Coconut Mall and Waluigi Pinball. It's easily the best song we're going to hear in today's video. Okay, wow, that section was a long one. It'd be nice if we got a simpler track to slow things down a little bit. Okay, well, not that simple. Mario Kart 7 decided to put its Toad track at the very beginning of the game, so we have by far our simplest course of the video with Toad Circuit. As both a circuit and a starter track, there's absolutely nothing special about this course's aesthetic, unless you want to count the giant Toad balloons. Okay, they are pretty awesome. Layout-wise, it's about what you would expect from a starter track. There are quite a few big turns here, which make it easy to stay on the track without falling into the off-road. I do like how the coins are placed on the first turn though, as they're pretty much all right next to that off-road. Normally, coins will be placed on the slower route to give more reason to drive there, but using them to give new players incentive to take a risk here on the faster route, I think works better for an opener track. Speaking of the off-road, the ending also has 2 pretty big patches of it that work well as shortcuts, which is something we haven't really seen in any of our Toad tracks yet. The first one even has a ramp, which is good to show that the players can go into the off-road, they just need to figure out how without slowing down. The ending patch also keeps the end of the race intense, as you never know when someone might squeak by at the last second because they got a bunch of mushrooms. Aside from that though, Toad Circuit also had the important task of introducing Mario Kart 7's main new gimmick, the glider ramp. This has been a very important feature for every Mario Kart game since, so giving players a good introduction was necessary. Honestly though, I'm a bit mixed on how it was implemented. Starting on lap 2, a glider ramp will appear in the middle of the track, which will give players a few extra coins if they use it. On the one hand, I think this does a good job rewarding player curiosity while also making sure the glider ramp is safe to use in case someone decides to crash and burn. On the other hand, it does feel a bit weird that it isn't required, and I think this could have been a much more interesting opening track if the player actually had to fly. It doesn't even need to be a big section either, just look at Mario Kart Stadium in 8 Deluxe. This does have a required glider ramp and works great as a tutorial, providing several coins for the player to collect while also being very difficult to accidentally fall off on. I think if Toad's Circuit implemented a section like that, I'd enjoy the track a bit more. As is, it's just a fine but very basic circuit track. I'll put it in C tier for reaching the bare minimum, but it is the bare minimum. Song is at least pretty good, probably the weakest so far, but it has some tough competition. Funnily enough, every single Toad track remake is either an 8 Deluxe or World, which means we're getting our final original Toad track of the video before we even see a single remake. Don't worry though, I've got a lot to say about those remakes. Toad Harbor was the track introduced in Mario Kart 8, and we are back to the courses that have fantastic vibes. The waterside town is just so relaxing to drive through, everything about this track just feels really pleasant. Of all the Toad tracks, this might just be my favorite atmosphere of the bunch. N64 Toad's Turnpike is definitely putting up some fierce competition, but the upbeat, colorful town on display here mixed with the bright sunshine just gives me such a joyous feel. It also helps that I don't get a lot of sunshine. I'd probably say, of the Toad tracks, this is the one that earned the name the most, as it feels pretty in line with his upbeat attitude and the multitude of colors Toads are found in. As for the layout, this is definitely our most complex track of the video, and I think that works really well for it. It has one of my favorite openings to a track, with a turn next to a small bit of off-road, followed by an immediate fork in the road. First off, the off-road is already fun by itself, as it being so small makes it possible to jump without losing any speed. The crate makes it difficult to do, but at the same time more satisfying as well. The fork in the road afterwards though is the true iconic part. You have the choice of either taking the safe path to the right, or you could take a speed boost by jumping onto and off of a boat at the left. What makes this boat path scary is the fact that other racers might make it difficult to take as it is pretty small. This is right at the start of the course after all, so players are going to be bunched up together. Sometimes on higher speeds, it's also possible to just totally miss the boat, so you have to be very careful taking this path. I really love having this option, and it's a great way to use this course's theme. That's not the end of the split paths though, as we're immediately given another choice to either drive on the ground or on top of market tents. I'd say the top path is generally safer, but also a bit slower. You won't lose a ton of time going up there, and it is pretty fun to trick off roofs, but in close races, it's best to stick to the floor. That's because the floor lets you take the turn here much tighter, though it is made extra difficult due to the poles holding up the market roofs. If you're even just a little bit off, you can easily bump into one of these and totally throw off your turn. Alternatively, you could even be off in the other direction, taking the turn too tightly and accidentally running into one of the barrels lining the edge of the course. Also, if you get lost or really mess up jumping on the roofs, there's even a boost panel in this corner to help you catch up a bit. Split paths really seem to be the theme of this course though, as leaving the market section presents us with another choice. Sticking to the floor gives you a safer but slower route, as it's much more open and has more item boxes for crowded races. The elevated path acts as a bit of a shortcut, and I think it's pretty fun to take due to the jump thrown into it. But of course, the choices do not end there. This track is starting to stress me out. Here we finally meet with this course's iconic trolley obstacle, which will drive down the middle of the road. Obviously, running into it will slow the player down, so we have several options on how to deal with it. The safest route is driving up on the wall, which is this course's only usage of anti-gravity. Being the safest route though, of course means it's the slowest, so sticking to the ground is the best for speed. You can either take the turn wide, which will give you much more wiggle room, or you can hug the wall for the best speed, but seriously risk tapping the trolley. I think all three of these options are pretty fun to take. Obviously, as the professional that I am though, I'll always prefer the faster route. Those paths all come together for one big slope down to the start of the course, and I love how even this super open area gives us options. There are tons of boost panels and ramps dotted all over the place, so it's fun to just move between them. I personally love trying to jump the trolleys using the ramps. But that brings us into the final turn, which is right next to a huge patch of off-road. Like I said back with Toad Circuit, this is the perfect opportunity for a last second pass, making the ending feel intense right up until the final moments. What makes this cut more interesting though are the trolleys, as they also ride alongside this off-road. That means they might block parts of the grass by the time the player approaches, forcing them to tweak how they take the cut every time they play. Speaking of the trolleys, I also personally love how you can go off to the side where they get stopped. It doesn't do anything practical, but it just feels extra fun to end a race that way. Oh, also, before I forget, there's an alternate path around a building that gives you like 3 extra coins. Don't take it, it's super slow. But with all that said, I honestly think I kind of love this track. It gives you so many options throughout the entire thing that makes each playthrough feel different. I mix up how I play this course all the time depending on my position in the race, and I think that's exactly how a Mario Kart track should be designed. Add on the incredibly relaxing vibes here, and I genuinely don't see a reason for this not to be an S tier. That's right, I think I like it even more than Toad's Factory. I will at least say that that course does have the better song, but Toad Harbor's music is great on its own as well. That segment was so long, Tomodachi Life, I'm sorry. Well, luckily, it's finally time for us to jump into our remakes, which should be a bit quicker since we just have to talk about the changes. Sadly, Toad's Turnpike changed a lot. Pretty much every aspect of this track got kinda worse in Mario Kart 8. Generally, I think Mario Kart 8 has incredible remakes. I'll defend Cheeseland until the day I die. But I think they really dropped the ball here with Toad's Turnpike. Starting with the visuals, while obviously the elements of the course look much better now, I don't think it's really able to capture the same vibe of the original. That mostly comes down to the skyline, which is just at nighttime now instead of that really specific dusk time in the original. I know it's a small thing, but I really feel like that carried a lot of the original's charm. What's also missing here is the original track's difficulty. The cars just don't take up as much of the road now, which obviously makes them easier to get around. I also often find that the track will just have portions where the road is completely barren with no cars in sight, completely removing anything interesting from the course. You're also given the option to drive on several of the walls now, which are slower than the road, but also much safer. I'm more mixed on this edition, but it does undeniably make the track easier. The saddest loss, though, is probably the fact that the track will no longer make the cars drive toward the player in mirror mode. Now this is just like every other mirror track. Yay. It's not all bad though. I do like that the item boxes move along the actual lanes now, as it sort of draws the players towards the cars. Coins replacing the item boxes off at the side works pretty well too. I also like some of the extra car variants here, especially the glider ones, as it can be really fun gliding over the other cars and even the starting bridge. Overall though, I do think this remake is a bit of a downgrade. Losing the vibes and difficulty of the original is a huge shame, and while I wouldn't call it a bad track now, it's certainly not one I love selecting. I'll put this in C tier above Toad Circuit. At the very least, this one is a bit more exciting. That was the only Toad remake in the base game of 8, so it's time to move on to the Booster Course Pass with... Aren't you forgetting something? No, don't make me. Please, let me just let me move on, please! While there are 7 Toad tracks in the series, there are also 2 battle maps with Toad in the name. In fact, they're the 2 tracks we just talked about. See, Mario Kart 8 for the Wii U did not care about its battle mode at all. It's the only game in the entire series to have not made courses exclusively for its battle mode, instead repurposing 8 of the game's tracks. This was an absolutely horrible decision, as these maps were just not built for battle mode at all. People would spread out far too much, making the fights battle mode is known for basically impossible. This decision alone was enough to make Wii U have the worst battle mode in the series, which they luckily fixed in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe by entirely replacing the map selection with actual battle maps. Unfortunately, as much as Nintendo would love to hide it, the Wii U does still exist, which means at one point in time, both Toad Harbor and Toad's Turnpike were playable battle maps. I don't think I have to go into a lot of detail here, these are both miserable to battle on. While I loved Toad Harbor's split paths in racing mode, it makes finding people extra annoying in battle mode. The cars in Toad's Turnpike make fighting people miserable, as it's extremely difficult to aim literally any shot. Most of the damage taken in the match will probably just be to stage hazards. Without a doubt, these both belong at the bottom of the list in F tier. I do think I slightly prefer Toad Harbor since the match probably won't be decided purely by cars, but it's not anywhere close to good. But okay, now we can move on to the Booster Course Pass. We only got one more Toad track here, but it is a pretty infamous one. After years of waiting for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe to get DLC tracks, they opened their DLC with Toad Circuit. Shut up, you don't count. As I stated in its section, it's an incredibly basic starter course. Certainly not the worst we've ever had, but I don't think anyone was really excited to see this. And seeing it was absolutely not helped by how ugly it was in 8 Deluxe. The original on the 3DS looked perfectly solid, but when it came over to this game... The texture work here was incredibly bad. Most things were just turned into solid colors. That was especially awful in comparison to 8 Deluxe's standard track selection, which all look incredible even to this day. It's safe to say that Toad's circuits really did not start the booster course pass off well, and while the DLC certainly got much better as it went, Toad's circuit still remains as a pretty glaring lowlight. And yes, graphics aren't everything of course, but when that's basically the only thing that changed between this and the original, I don't really have a ton else to comment on. So for that, I'm going to be putting this at the top of F tier. I honestly think it looks uglier than it did on the 3DS, so it's a complete failure of a remake. At least the Toad battle maps are so awful that Toad's circuit gets to place above them. Man, Toad has been having a rough time with these last few segments. Can Mario Kart World save his reputation and give him a good track to end on? Well, Mario Kart World might not do a lot right, but I can say with confidence that it at least treated Toad pretty well. I should stop being so mean to you, I'm sorry. Toad's factory was brought back from the dead here, and at first, it may not seem like a ton has been changed. I'm sure people wouldn't complain if that was the case, seeing how well liked the original is, but there were actually some good changes here. They all come from the game's new parkour mechanics, which add so much depth to every track in its selection. It's a shame we can't play them often. Toad's factory is no exception, as several areas of the track have gotten new parkour additions thrown in. Now, to be completely honest, a lot of them are kinda useless. Like at the start, there's a line of coins going up the wall to show that there's an extra path, but all this path does is waste time. You could maybe argue it's safer than going on the ground, but I would disagree since I feel like players that would need a safe route would struggle with the wall riding mechanic. Plus, it's so much slower that it's probably better to just get hit on the normal route anyway. There's also an extra rail inside the conveyor portion later, but it's extremely difficult to reach in a normal race since you have to rely on the platforms being in the perfect position outside. I'd be fine with that if the path was a really good shortcut, but it's just another slower but safer route. Luckily though, these are totally ignorable additions, so even if they are pretty pointless, they don't harm the track. That said, there are definitely some great parkour additions too. The first turn leading to the outside now has a rail to grind on, making this have a much more interesting speed strat. Most importantly to me though is the ending jump, which just feels so much more fun now. Instead of jumping down onto some bumps like in the original, you will now notice that a couple metal bars are being held up by construction equipment. If you decide to land on those instead, it's revealed that they act like rails, and you can chain jumps between them in order to cut over this final corner. I love doing this every time I come back here. It's not the most complicated cut in the world, but it just feels very satisfying to pull off. It makes the ending have much more engaging gameplay and overall brings up my opinion of the track pretty significantly. So much so that I think I'm willing to put this up in our S tier above Toad Harbor. I do think it's a close contest, but the added depth of the parkour mixed with Toad Factory's fantastic theme really makes this remake stand out as a phenomenal track. But anyways, that's it for this video. Do you consider Shroom Ridge a Toad track because Shroom and hate me for not covering it? Let me know in the comments. This somehow ended up being much longer than I was expecting it to be. I think graduating has unlocked an even higher level to my yapping abilities. Hopefully you all enjoyed the analysis on these tracks though. But before I go, I've got to thank my members being Leepox14, Megal Mari, Danny Gaming Central, She's the Pow, Lorenz1023, Lucius Lovely, Foxtrot4744, Luis L64, Mr. G333, The Silent 123, Lilliput69, Windows Vista's fan-made content, newly rated Geometry Dash levels, Genie VV Yoso, Wyatt Derpy, Leonard Von Hevering, Maidzio2, Starfly, Disco Fama, Cassie Channel, Drop D Mike 75, Virtual Tomato, Extreme 5026, Daniel Castillo 1262, Aaron 0729, Anton 3669, Smuggy, Guy 112, Young Smoky VP7, Zach Pro, Flame 765, Peanut Brown of Gallery, Gorposaurus, BFDI Macaron, Stephen Hafner, Night Vision 101, PDX, Wilbur, Mogo Mogo Boat, Stuffy Ant, Ridge229, Jehojim, Magnuson Larslot, Trifector, Tibby, Hippopotamus, Levi Strux, Nuclear, Blessed Tiger, Yanni the Duck, Trader Mo, Mevins 2001, Display Changer, B Major 2003, Sir Musty, Belandor, Cinder CC, Jade Avery, Thicky Reiki, Ingenio TM, Tesseract, JubeTube, Jameson Pageson, Z Frost Keep, and Christian Flattery Sequel Edition. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.